I thought it'd be warm and the attendance would be low, but I see that it is not. Oh, I'm very happy to be with you. Beth, excuse me, I don't mean to. And Sharon, sweet friends, sweet dear friends. Um, for years, I have said, because yes, I taught 12th grade forever, and I still substitute in my high school. I'm telling you, they call and beg, and I go and try to get them going the right direction. But I'm a voracious reader, and topics and books usually find me that I'm going to talk about. Um, I was visiting with my dear friend Paula. We were young mothers together, our daughters were best friends, and I am a novice oil painter. I've been painting with oil since I was 8 years old. And my friend Paula was a glass artist, a very excellent glass artist. She had commissions from all over the country. Our daughters, as I said, were best friends, so we got to know each other. I was visiting with her. I went back and visited with her. We were in her studio, and of course, like every artist on the studio, in their studio on a coffee table, they will have beautiful coffee table books. And I was looking at one and just kind of peering over there. And she said, Rebecca, you remember when I studied with Dale Chihuly? I said, oh, I do remember when you did. She went to Canberra, Australia to get her, I believe it was third master's degree. This was in glass fusion. But when I knew her, I would often help her with her glass projects. So, because I adored watching her, the alchemy of this liquid substance that can be our windshield, or it can be something very, very beautiful. I just thought it was amazing. And of course, I love color, and so did she. But because I worked with her, I knew, uh, I was acutely aware, oh my goodness, of the labor intensive work it is in constructing glass. It is delicate, it is dangerous, it's heavy, very heavy. It comes in big sheets, crated, extremely hot, 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. And in the summer, it was dreadful. I have seen months of beautiful work destroyed in just a minute. It's heartbreaking, but to a glass artist, it's always kind of a new opportunity. Um, beautiful, beautiful glass objects. Um, when I came back, I had an appointment at Southwestern at the Sea Tower, the biomedical Sea Tower for cancer research. I see some of you shaking your heads. I walked in, a little trepidation. I walked in, and to my right there was this huge orange something, and I turned and looked at it, and I thought, "Oh my goodness, that's got to be Dale Chihuly." And walked over, and sure enough, it was. It's 14 feet tall. It sits in a placid pool of water that's lit up from the bottom, and it's these spirals going up. And I just stood there for a moment and thought, no matter what happens here, I'm going up. I am truly going up. By the time I got home, that was 2 references to Dale Chihuly that I found, and I thought, I really want to find out more about him. Of course, my friend talked about him for an hour or so, but I wanted to find out things on my own. Well, Chihuly's world is all about color. Wonderful, wonderful color. Some of you have a favorite color. My mother used to tell me, now this is your signature color, Rebecca. My husband thinks it's black because I have at least 20 pairs of black pants, and I always go to the black dresses. I don't know. But incidentally, black is one of Chihuly's favorite colors because he says without the voids, the color cannot pop out to reach the viewer. Our first touch with color came probably in a little flip top box. Mine had one row of colors, and we would color and we'd make things, and our color would be on that paper. Somewhere along the way, somebody taught you this is the red balloon. Now, this is the blue kite. This is blue, and this is red. This is yellow. And we learned our colors. And most of us loved colors. Now, kids today, they've got a box of 50 magic markers, and I've never seen anything like it. But also, when we were children, we probably had a kaleidoscope, and we looked through that kaleidoscope and thought, how does that work? What is that makes that pattern so beautiful? We had sparklers. Remember sparklers? And it burst out in the color, and we thought, that is just amazing. Some of us went to churches that had beautiful stained glass window, just like this one. I spent more time looking at the stained glass window than I ever did at the altar, I have to say. I just thought it was magnificent. And that light would come through that stained glass, and it would dapple down on the floor or on me. I thought it was mesmerizing. Some of us had a piece of glass in our family. In your family. This was in our family. And it was in my living room. It was my grandmother's. I couldn't decide if it was a cowboy hat or an ashtray, but I loved it. I loved the swirling colors in it. And of course, I'd tiptoe in there and pick it up. My mother'd say, "Now don't touch it, Rebecca, you'll break it." But so far, I have kept it, and I do truly cherish it. But I want you to think of, for a moment, this particular art material, just like my piece of glass that was in my home. This is a work of art that is not made from oil paints. It's not made from watercolor. It's not made from acrylic paints. It's not made from bronze or marble or gold or paper or threads, but it is blown glass. It takes the breath of the artist to create it. And that is what I think is so amazing about it. It can survive on the beach. It can survive in gardens, outside, like we saw in 2012. It can survive in 25 feet of snow with a heating mechanism, which Dale Chihuly has done. It can survive 6 stories vertically with a lot of engineering. Well, this is the world. This is the world of Dale Chihuly. This is Dale Chihuly's favorite picture of himself. And you can see he's standing beside something large and beautiful, very beautiful. And most people that have seen his work know anything about him. They know that he has an eye patch, and they can almost tell you who he is, even if they can't pronounce his last name. Some people described him as a wild-haired Merlin magician. Some people, like my friend, a salty pirate. Salty. Some, a swashbuckling artist. Because when he was younger, he really did look like a swashbuckler. Blowing pipes can be this big, or they can be as big as a car. And going into that heat, he did kind of look like a swashbuckling artist. Mischievous man, cunning. One of his good friends, Barbara Rose, she co-authors most of his books. The coffee table books are the books you read. And she said, I would describe Dale Chihuly as living in different universes. She said, in any given day, he could be bouncing around and follow Alice down in the rabbit hole just to kind of see what interesting things he can find. And then he wakes up one day and goes over to Oz. And then he wakes up another day and thinks, why don't I just go down in a cave and see what I can figure out for myself? Um, Always wearing his paint splattered shoes wherever he goes. This is a picture of one of his items that he did for the Children's Museum in Indianapolis. This is 43 feet tall. You can tell how many stories there are. It's 18,000 pounds of glass. Well, because I worked with my friend, I knew the armature, I knew the engineering, the stress of the glass. If glass is going to be inside and outside, that has to be taken into consideration. So I knew exactly the huge amount of engineering that it took to keep this up safely. He's very generous with children, children's hospitals, and of course, children's museums like this one in Indianapolis. My friend said he can be very charismatic, uh, but he can also be very complicated. He can sometimes be rude and sometimes be condescending. But he is an entrepreneur that ceaselessly promotes his artistic material of glass. He absolutely loves it. Barbara Rose also said that when he came onto the glass scene in about late 60s to 70s, that he blew in like Superman. He destroyed everything that we thought of as beautiful glass. Everything, because his was very contemporary, very different. You know, I usually tell when I give this talk, I say, you know, I have some beautiful pieces of glass in my home. I have a Waterford lamp that I put on layaway when I first started teaching. I love this lamp. I love the cut glass in it. My daughter doesn't want it. No. Raise your hand. You are my people. You are my people. The cut glass that was my mother in law's, my mother's, my grandmother's, she didn't want it. No. But he did. He flew in and really kind of just pushed aside many of the items that we thought really were very beautiful and expensive glass. Um, but in that flying in, he destroyed stereotypes of what we thought was beautiful glass. He linked continents together all over the world with his installations. Many touted him early on as he will be the most famous glass artist since Louis Comfort Tiffany. And my friend told me that. She went in the early 90s, late 80s to Australia, and she said, he's right up there with Tiffany. He's known for his exuberant colors. He's also known for his exotic shapes, these strange shapes that kind of catch your eye and think, what was he thinking? What 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 is this? But you can't take your eye off of it. It's so beautiful. He's known for his grand scale, very much like this one, and very much like what we saw in 2012 at our Arboretum. He's known for the configuration and where he puts it. It's got to be put just right, or he moves it. Strange configuration. And of course, his items are inside beautiful museums right here in Dallas. And they are also outside. I think when he started showing his work outside, it it elevated it to a whole new level to me. Uh, It really did. And Chihuly will tell you in many of the articles I read about him, he said the mystery of glass is that it was an ancient material, probably found, created by the Persians. He always says Persia in probably 2000 BC. And he often says in an article, I would have loved to have been there. When somebody had picked that sand up, maybe put a mineral in it and heated it, he said, I would have loved to have been there. Well, my friend called me. This is another beautiful piece. Just simple, but stunning. My friend called me and she said, now, Rebecca, Chihuly has negotiated with a new hotel in Las Vegas. It's called the Bellagio. This was 1996. It wasn't supposed to open until 1998. And she said, it's in the works and it's going to be a huge installation. So if Buddy, my husband, if he has a meeting there, you go. And sure enough, it hadn't been open 2 or 3 months. And this is the ceiling of the Bellagio Hotel. This is 40,000 pounds of glass up above you. And there again, the glass is phenomenal. It's almost like a siren. You just can't stop looking at it. It's so beautiful. And of course, as I stood there, because I had worked with my friend Paula, I knew what engineering, what armature, what crossbars took to put that up safely. But it is stunning, and it is still stunning today. There are many other pieces in the Bellagio Hotel and others in Las Vegas, just like there are pieces in hotels here in Dallas. Beautiful pieces, chandeliers, standalone pieces, exquisite. Well, in 2012, in Dallas, most of us went to our botanic garden. We had season tickets. We lived in Dallas at that time. We had season tickets. I went morning, noon, night. I went when it rained. I went when it misted. I went the day after the hailstorm. And I wanted it all. I thought it elevated the botanic garden, our beautiful botanic garden, so much. It was stunning. And we all remember the boat, the beautiful boat. He incorporates a boat often because he grew up on the ocean in Tacoma, and he loves boats and he loves rain and mist and hail. I knew too, because of my friend and then the research I did, when he puts an installation in, like he did in the Arboretum, he travels with trucks loads of replacement parts. They're parked off site. So that day of the hailstorm, my husband woke up and was worried about the skylight. And I immediately thought of Chihuly's work. But surprisingly, very little was broken because his glass is so thick. That makes it heavy, durable. But I did. I went the day after the hailstorm. He flies in electricians, welders, engineers. He flies in his hand-picked assistants, and it's back within a matter of hours. It's really quite amazing. Even if it's destroyed completely, which some places it has been, vandals, and it's replaced very quickly. I went back to the Arboretum the day it left. I looked around. It was almost void to me. I came home, I said, oh my gosh, buddy, it's gone. It's gone. I just knew some wealthy Texan would say, we'll take this piece, that piece, and that piece. But no, it was all gone. It was packed up and gone. I was just in the depths of depression. And of course, my husband said, Rebecca, I'm sure there's 100,000 tulip bulbs just about ready to pop up. And true enough, it was right. Well, long before the Bellagio Hotel, long before he came to the Arboretum in 2012, long before Microsoft and Starbucks came to the Pacific Northwest, um, Dale Chihuly was born in Tacoma, Washington in 1941. He described it as a blue collar small town right there on the ocean. His father was a butcher and a labor organizer. His mother was a stay at home mom. And this is his brother, George Jr. George Jr. was 4 years older than Dale. And you can see that Dale had curly hair. His brother had this beautiful, gorgeous, straight blonde hair. He said, I was born round with curly hair. And then he had this brother that was the golden child, but he adored his older brother. It was his older brother that taught him to play poker and to run the pool table in a pool hall. Um, his mother, as I said, was known. She was a stay at home mom, a little small clapboard house. She was known in town for her flowers. And she had what my grandmother called comeback flowers. Everything she had came back: roses, hydrangeas, sunflowers, azaleas, and she freely gave them for weddings. She gave them for anniversary parties. When they were in bloom, everybody knew that Viola Chihuly had the most beautiful flowers in town. Dale said when he was little, he said, I didn't think much about those flowers. He said, I really didn't. He said, I probably thought, well, those are pretty colors. But he said, I didn't think one thing about them. He said, my mother would try to rope us in, George Jr. and myself, to pulling weeds. And he said, somehow George Jr. kind of got out of it. But he said, I was little and I'd crawl under the bushes. And it was kind of nice and cool under there. He said, I'd shake the hydrangeas and I'd watch the petals fall down. And he said, I pulled very few weeds, but he said, I did like how the sun could peek through and dapple down on me. And he said, I probably felt of a rose petal. He said, I'm sure I did. And I thought, oh, well, that's soft. Isn't that odd? He said, I often wondered these sunflowers. How in the world do those sunflowers, that big old sunflower, stay up on that tiny little stalk and those great big leaves? He said, but I didn't think anything about it. It wasn't anything that I was going to find out about. He said, it was just, that's the way it was when they bloomed. And it was pretty. And people bragged on my mother. And he adored his parents. He did, especially because she took such pride in her flowers. But as a grown man, he readily admits he credits his mother's flowers that he didn't care anything about with his love of color, of light, of movement. You could imagine that big sunflower following. As a child, Dale and his family took walks on the beach, and he said my brother and I would pick up little shards of glass, little sea glass. We'd come home, put it in our mason jar along with our marbles. But he said, I didn't think anything about that. I didn't think a thing about it. He readily admits he was a poor student. He didn't like school at all. He didn't even like elementary school. He didn't. He would oftentimes pretend he was sick. He got to stay home. Now, George Jr., His brother loved school. He loved everything about it. He was great at sports. And of course, he was handsome, this handsome young man. Uh, and he said, I was not good at sports. I didn't like school. I never won a medal. He said, I really didn't like anything except playing poker and running the pool table. He said so many days in junior high and high school, the truant officer would bring me home. He said, I'd just get up and walk out of class. I was tired of it and I didn't want to stay there anymore. He said, police officers would bring me home. They had found me at the pool hall playing poker with adult men. He said, I would also get in trouble for taking stones and throwing out street lamps. And, I thought about that and I thought, was that his first with destroying glass, maybe hearing the glass sound and the hitting the floor? And of course, his parents were mortified, just absolutely mortified. Dale, you have got to stay in class. You have got to stop doing this. And he said, I just kind of shrugged my shoulders, and he said, I tried to like it, but I didn't like it. I didn't like anything. Not one subject did I like. And he readily admits this in most of his books, in most of his interviews. He did not. But he said his childhood was just typical. His father worked, his mother stayed home. We rode bicycles all summer long. I'd follow my brother everywhere he went. But his life changed when he was 14 years old. When he was 14, his brother, George Jr., was killed in a Navy airplane training accident in Florida, and he was devastated. He said, I was never jealous of my older brother. I adored my older brother, just adored him. And he was gone. A year and a half later, his father died of a massive heart attack. So in under 2 years' time, half of his immediate family was gone. His mother said, now, Dale, I'm going to go to work. We're going to get a job and I'm going to be able to keep our home. I am. I'm going to keep it. Don't think that. Because Dale was all ready to drop out of school and go down to the docks, lie about his age. Tacoma was a fishing town and a timber town, and you could always get a job on the docks. And he thought that's what he'd do. He was 15, going on 16, and that's what he'd do. And she said, no, you're not. No, you're going to finish high school. Well, he didn't want to, but he adored his mother, the tragedy that was in the family. She did get a job, and he promised her he would finish high school. And he did. He did finish high school. Well, after graduation, he had no interest in taking another class anywhere. And his mother said, Dale, now listen, I want you to do something for me. We have the money. We do. We have the money. And I want you to stay right here in town. And I want you to go to the College of Puget Sound, small little college right there in Tacoma. And he said, why would you want me to go? I don't want to go. You know I hate school. And this wise mother, she said, I just want you to take 2 classes for me first semester. Well, he didn't want to, but because he adored his mother, he knew the tragedy she had been through, and he said, okay, I'll take 2. And like most freshmen, they take English 101 or 102. Well, he signed up for 102, which is writing, and then he had another class. Well, he got in his writing class, and he realized he'd probably never written a paper, or if he did, he probably failed because he had no idea. A 5-paragraph essay. One of his classmate said, well, you do know what a thesis statement is, don't you? And she said, no, I don't have any idea. Well, they said, we'll help you. We will. We'll help you. Well, by now, his mother said, you can live in the basement. You can come and go. There's a door. You don't have to tell me where you are. You can be down there. You can have friends in, that sort of thing. So that's what he did. He took over the basement. He cleaned it out. That was his bedroom. That was his place to have people over to play poker. In the writing class, the final was you got to write a paper with these particulars. You've got to go to the library. You've got to get a book of an artist, and you've got to flip through that book and find a painting and write about that painting. Well, he goes to the library, finds one with a yellow binding, pulls it out, opens it up. It's Van Gogh. He's flipping through there, and he goes, oh, sunflowers. I know something about sunflowers. I can write about this. So he does. He writes about this with the help of classmates, and he gets an A on his paper. He said, I couldn't remember if I'd ever gotten an A. He said, I probably hadn't gotten anything over a C, even in elementary school. Well, he's thrilled, and of course his mom's so proud of him. He doesn't do well on the other class, but she says, all right now, Dale, I want you to take 2 classes second semester summer school. Oh, he says, oh no, I do not want to do this. I do not. But she talks him into it. He takes 2 more classes second semester, doesn't do real well, but all this time his wise mother was putting him in with kids that did care and knew how to do it right and cared to make a 4 point. And I thought that was brilliant of her, because she could have said, yep, you hate school. Nope, go to the docks. You'll be a blue-collar worker all your life, but that's okay. But she didn't. She pushed him in there, even when he didn't do well. Well, he finished second semester, and she said, brought him into the house, and she said, now, Dale, I want you to do something for me. I want you to take a full load at the University of Washington in Seattle, the university. Tacoma and Seattle, probably 30 miles from each other. She said, you can stay here, you can live in the basement, drive back and forth. Here again, you can imagine this kid that's going, please. But he does. He goes up, talks to the counselor. The counselor says, well, you got to declare a major. He said, I have no idea. I don't know anything. He said, just put it blank. She said, no, we have to put something. He said, unknown. And that's what he put. This was 1962, 1961 fall semester. Well, he goes, doesn't do well on his grades at all. And she convinces him to go back second semester. This is now 1962, spring semester. And he begins his aimless going to pool halls, making money, playing poker. And finally he comes home and he said, Mom, I'm going to drop out of school. I hate it. There's not anything I like about it. Not one thing. And she said, well, what are you going to do? And he said, well, there's a group of guys that are going to go to Europe. And he said, I think that's what I'll do. And here again, she said, okay. He said, I'll make money playing poker or heaven for bartending. I've heard this from high school kids too. I want y'all to know. I said, oh, great. Let me know how your mother acts when you tell her that. But he does. He ends up in Paris. He ends up in Florence. Beautiful buildings, beautiful architecture. And he said, I remember standing there thinking, these buildings are 800-900 years old. They must have had a string and a plumb, very rudimentary, but beautiful and still standing. But he said, here again, I didn't say, that's what I want to do. I want to be an architect. I want to be a builder. He said, no, I just thought they were beautiful. He ends up in 1963 in a kibbutz in the middle of the Negev desert. He likes what they're doing. Every day they give him, this is your list, Dale. This is what you're going to complete today. And he rather likes that, likes knowing what he's going to do. He's been told not to walk out into the Negev desert. You'll get lost. You think you won't, but you will. You will. This is just tiny. We have a few lights on in the evening, but one evening he walks out. He does walk out, but he keeps that light behind him. He keeps walking, and of course, the stars are magnificent. And he's looking around, and he looks over, and he sees a white light. And he's looking at that, thinking, what in the world is that? They've not told me there's anything out here. And he stands there, and he said it was if that light spoke to him and said, Dale, you need to find your light. He goes back and tells them, well, they've never seen a white light before, but he said, something happened to me in that desert. So he goes to Petra with a friend who begs him to go. Petra in Jordan, they hitchhiked. He goes to this beautiful ancient city, and he thinks, here again, look at the grand scale of these carvings. This is amazing. How in the world did they do this? Balanced, beautiful. He comes back to the University of Washington, and he said, I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better. Comes back, lives at home, enrolls back in the University of Washington, does okay. Here again, never a great student, but he is searching. He is searching. What is my light? What am I going to do? What am I here for? I don't love anything. He takes a weaving class. And the final, here again, was to make a weaving to put unconventional materials in it. And a lot of people were putting rusty nails, or they broke a radio and they were putting plastic in it. And he looks around in his basement, which a lot of his friends have kept stuff there. And he thought, well, I know there's some glass shards, little shards of glass here. I'm going to do that. I'm going to put it in my... And he does. And instead of a tight weaving, it was a real open weave, so the light could pass through it. He takes it, he turns it in, and the professor is dumbfounded. He said, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And of course, Dale was too. He ends up making one for his mother, and there's pictures of it with the light coming through in their dining room. He said, you'll get this back in about 2 years, Dale. It's going to go to our library, and then it'll go to be on display at our sister universities. Well, he's kind of amazing. He keeps taking some classes, some art type stuff. And in 1965, Dale Chihuly, who hated school, graduated from the University of Washington with his bachelor's in interior design. And he had lived at home in that basement all those years. Well, one night he was at home, and he thought, somebody left a kiln in here, a little bitty kiln. And of course, he's just got junk everywhere that belongs to some of his friends. He finds the little kiln. He has no idea what to do with it. He has there's no pamphlet. He hadn't read anything. He just thought, well, I'll plug this in, see what happens. And he thought, well, now there's some glass around here. He gets some glass up. He comes back. Yes, it's warm. Throws those shards of glass in there, shuts it, comes back, has no idea if he'll burn the house down. And somebody left a little blowing pipe. He opens it up and he stirs that glass around, and he brings it up on that blowing pipe and blows. And he blows something that looks very similar to this, a ball. And he said, right that minute, he said, I knew I had found my light. He tells his mother, needless to say, like some mothers, her response was, "Can you make a living doing that?" I've heard that from moms too of high school kids. Um, but it's now 1966. He is obsessed with glass blowing, reading everything he can. There's no place to study glass blowing in the Pacific Northwest. But he finds one of his professors at Washington said, there is a new glass study that's going to be open at the University of Wisconsin. His name is Harvey Littleton. That's where you need to go. Well, he didn't have any money, so he goes to the docks that summer. He takes a boat to Alaska. You make more money if you're gone all summer. And even today, he will say that Alaska has the most beautiful ice in the world. The blue, gorgeous. He uses ice often with neon running through it. Took that money, went to the University of Wisconsin, and absorbed everything he could. He eventually received a full scholarship to the University of Wisconsin. And here again, he received not only his bachelor's from the University of Washington, but from the University of Wisconsin, he now has a master's degree in sculpture. Well, Harvey Littleton said, I've taught you everything you know. Where you need to go now, Dale, next is the Rhode Island School of Design. That's where you need to go. Here again, he goes back to the docks, works, makes money, and goes to the Rhode Island School of Design. When he got there, he had to have an apartment and he had to have a studio space. In looking for apartments, one of the apartments he looked at was once lived in by Edgar Allan Poe, and he said, I'll take it. Wanted to find interesting things if they were still floating around. His studio was in a converted funeral home basement. And of course, he loved that too. A story is told that one of his professors comes in with several of the students that are in the same class he's in, and they come into the basement, and from the ceiling are hung these huge red blobs, kind of with white veining, and his professor looked up and said, what is this, Dale? And he said, well, I looked up at this ceiling and it looked exactly like my father's butcher shop ceiling. So we had to have carcasses. And his professor said, good luck with selling that. But he didn't care. It didn't matter to him. He saw that ceiling, thought we needed carcasses hanging from it. Really quite amazing. He expressed early on, even when he was studying at the Rhode Island School of Design, that he wanted his work to represent a departure from the past. He wanted gravity, moving those, throwing that glass on the end of that pipe, gravity, centrifugal force. He was the first one that I can remember that I've read about that back in the 60s, 70s was using the word organic. He wanted the glass to speak organically, to find its own way, which is an interesting concept. Now we hear organic all the time. In 1968, he had a second master's degree. That same year, he was awarded the Lewis Comfort Tiffany Foundation Grant and a Fulbright Fellowship. He took some of that money and he went to the island of Murano to study the glass blowers there. Usually, they're very secretive about many things they do in glass blowing in Murano, but they can tell that he had more energy, more passion, than most people that ever come there. And so they threw the doors open to him. And it was there that he saw there's a glass master and hand-picked assistants are around him. And the glass master is telling them what he wants done. Consequently, you can build bigger items if you have 5 people on this blowing pipe, 5 men holding it. It can be something larger, heavier. Well, he worked with glass, he said, from 1962 to 1976, and he said, I couldn't give my work away. Well, needless to say, I rushed to see if I possibly had a piece of his, some of his work that he created in the 60s and 70s, and alas, I did not. Sadly, I did not. No, but he said he took them to farmers markets. He took them to Lutheran bazaars and everywhere, and he said I couldn't give my work away. But he continued to create, absolutely to create, and started teaching. He began to think of, why can't we have things outside? Beautiful things were inside, of course, but he kept thinking, why can't they be outside? And that juxtaposition between the nature and the beautiful beauty of the outdoor with his substance that he loves, glass. Why couldn't it be? And of course, many of us have seen that over and over and over again, not only in the Arboretum, but many places where it's. I do have an acquaintance in Fort Worth, a very wealthy woman, and she has a beautiful installation in her backyard. And I stand there and try to remember I'm not supposed to be envious, but it is truly stunning. And she's very happy for me to come and see it. Well, in 1969, Chihuly is in Providence. The glass department has been well established there, and they want him to teach. And he teaches for the next 15 years. Many of his students said that he was obsessive with glass. He was just obsessed with it. But he was self-confident. He was highly observant, extremely demanding, hugely supportive. But at a moment's notice, he could, without warning, turn foreboding, dark, and sometimes would just leave. Well, in 1971, he taught from the fall and spring semester, but then he would go back home to Tacoma. And in 1971, he said, it is a crying shame that there is no place to study glass in Tacoma, Washington. So he talked somebody into giving him a piece of property, and on that property there is a small lake. And the property is called Pilchuck. It's a Native American term. And of course, this is not the Pacific Northwest, but these balls, we would call them pods. Look how beautiful they look in the desert area. I mean, it's just exquisite. But he takes these pods and he puts them in the lake. He blows them, puts them in the lake, and some have weights on them, some don't. If they are in a storm, it doesn't matter. The next summer, he'll come back. That first summer, that pictures of the Pilchuck School, it looks like Woodstock. It looks like your worst nightmare if you're a mother. Tents, these kids, but the Pilchuck School now has become world renowned. He went back every year and did a little bit more every year. They built cabins there. They built the big furnaces there. And as I say, today people come from all over the world to study at the Pilchuck School. Well, he said he taught until 1976, and he said, I could barely make a living teaching. Yes, I see you out there. I do. He said, I couldn't make a living. Buying glass is expensive. It usually comes from Europe. Um, so he said, I needed to do something different. So in 1976, he blows a body of work, he photographs it, and then he sends it uh, to museums. And he sent several packets of these photographs uh, to England, to the UK. And he gets a letter from one of the museums in outside of London and said, "We're interested in your work." And he and a friend, they went over. He had no idea, none whatsoever, how to negotiate. He had none whatsoever how to get it insured, nothing. But he and this friend go, and they do sign a contract. So now he has to ship it to England, he has to place it, and so forth. But while he is there on his first visit, he and his friend have an automobile accident. And consequently, that's where he loses the use of his eye in about a year or two. He goes into a terrible depression because even I, as an artist, I think I, using losing your eyesight would be so unnerving. And he does. He's very depressed about it. But then he remembers Murano and he thinks, wait a minute, I could be the choreographer, not the dancer, but the choreographer. I could handpick people. And he comes out of that depression, and that's exactly what he does. And of course, his eye patch by 1979, when he's lost his eye, it becomes his trademark. Absolutely, it does. Working with handpicked, talented people. Um, what he does, he is throwing paint. What he does, he gets drop cloths, gets huge bottles of paint, tempera paint, and he throws down what he wants. And then when he finishes, if he's in front of a bunch of people there in the gallery, he just throws paint on them. And that's why that little boy is turned around. He'll have paint all over his shirt from Dale Chihuly. Um, but it's interesting. In so many pictures I found, Dale Chihuly loves yellow pants. He wears them often, and you can see his paint splattered shoes that he wears everywhere he goes. Um, he creates a second installation. It's called Blankets and Baskets. He creates that in 1977. And it's a collection of Native American baskets and blankets in glass. Beautiful. He loved Native American art. He did, especially in and around Santa Fe, the Navajo. So the colors are just brilliant. Well, by now he has realized I need a friend that's a lawyer. I need a friend that's an insurance person. I need a friend that I need people to help me negotiate. And that's what he did. And every installation, he got better at it, of course, and began making real money. He continued to work and create beautiful. Um, we had something like this at the Arboretum. Remember that starburst that was at the front? Just absolutely beautiful. Uh, Third series was the Seafoam series, and it had that beautiful Alaskan ice color. Gorgeous. He loved everything about the sea. He loved the water. He loved the storms. He said, I grew up in the rain. I love my work to be rained on because he said it adds a different dimension to it. In 1986, one of my favorite that he did was called the Persian series. And it's 12th century Middle Eastern glass. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. By the 90s, he starts on chandeliers. They become small, but then just a friend wanted one. And then they became bigger and bigger and bigger, larger. And To some of them, he even turned them upside down. Uh, just something out of the ordinary. In 1996, he has negotiated for about 4 years with Venice. My husband said, I can't imagine the insurance people, the negotiating people that went, because he wanted to put his chandeliers under the old bridges. He wanted to be under there. And there are photographs of people in gondolas looking up at these beautiful chandeliers over and under the bridges. Because had they fallen, Venice is an old city, a beautiful city, an interesting city. Um, but he wanted them to experience light and color in some way that they had never seen before. And that was certainly it. And here again, that juxtaposition between the new contemporary and the old world Venice was amazing, just amazing. Continues, oh my goodness, creating. Um, Many more exhibitions. He's not teaching any longer. He's working at the Pilchuck School, making it bigger and better all the time. Um, One of my favorite is this one. It was Chihuly over Jerusalem. And my husband said, I cannot imagine in the holy city of Jerusalem him convincing them that, yes, I can make something 43 feet in the air. And because every stone in old Jerusalem is priceless. Now, this is him. You can see that he is looking up at this installation. Most of the colors he used in Jerusalem were not the bright Navajo colors. No, they were light plums. They were beautiful blues. To me, that just kind of seemed like a nod to the holy city. To me, it did. But this was amazing. And this is not far from the Wailing Wall. So you can imagine. I did have a friend that went to Jerusalem and saw this exhibit, and she said it was interesting. People at the Wailing Wall of all denominations, people from around the world, looking at the wall and looking over to this beautiful glass that's rising up, out of the seemingly out of the ground. Well, by now, he's everywhere, truly everywhere. Victoria and Albert, I think he's been there several times. Garfield Park in Chicago, um, Florida. He's been in New York City, Brooklyn, California, in between. You saw the picture of in the desert. Um, and he is also going out to Australia, New Zealand. He's going to Dubai, Iceland, you name it. At any time, he may have several installations going. Um, his work is beautiful everywhere I've seen it. Now, I didn't go to Iceland. I think that would be fascinating to see his glass there. But I've seen it all over the country. There is a permanent exhibit at the Biltmore home, behind the home, and it is beautiful, truly beautiful. And it's not that far from us. Ruidoso. Of course, Ruidoso's had some terrible fires, but Ruidoso has a huge permanent exhibit there as well. But he's been all over the world, truly all over the world. Well, in 2005, he was 64 years old, and he married for the first time. And my husband said, well, no wonder he could do such wonderful things. I said, I beg your pardon. He said, well, he could. He didn't have to think about anybody but himself. He married a girl, an Oklahoma girl. She was a Vassar grad, much, much younger than he is, and is lovely. And she is now kind of in charge of Chihuly Enterprises. Continuing La Jolla, Springfield, St. Louis. And of course, in 2012, he came to us. Also in 2012, he opened his museum. Yes. Um, his museum is in Seattle. It is permanently there. It is at the base of the Space Needle. I was there last fall. Just going to tell you right now, I have a student that's a Seattle Seahawk who adored me and I adored him. So we were in Seattle seeing him, and of course went to his beautiful museum there, and it's lovely, really lovely. He has a glass house. He calls this glass within glass, and of course you can buy smaller pieces of his work there, but it's very, very expensive. A little small bow, 5,000 to 10,000. It depends on a lot of things. How many times it was fired? How many? I didn't go home with a present, but it's just wonderful to be there and to see it. It was troubling to him. He wanted to put his museum in Tacoma. He did not want to snub Tacoma, but he knew that more people would see it in Seattle, and he did not snub Tacoma. We went to Tacoma. He's got beautiful things there everywhere. Well, by now, Chihuly is about 83 years old. He is not in good health. He has not blown glass for decades. And during this time period, in the last 20 years, he and his wife have been very forthcoming about, Jack. Now, he and his wife have been very forthcoming about his mental illness. He is bipolar. He said he knew he was bipolar when he was 20 years old. And it explains so much. My friend knew when he came out as bipolar. She said, well, that explains so many things. Because when he was depressed, he was really, really depressed. But he said, I was fortunate. I could climb out of my depression. It may take me a week, 2 weeks, it may take me all year, but I could. And he said so many other people can't. They just can't. And we've known celebrities. Nobody was more talented than Robin Williams. Nobody. They just can't. They can't. So he has thrown his money and his prestige, he and his wife, behind the researchers for this awful disease. He firmly says, at his age now, as long as I'm excited to see light pass through glass, I will continue to create beautiful art and wear my paint-splattered shoes, even to meet the King of England. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.